Yo, what's going on everyone? Guiding Light here back with another video. And last night I tore through all of the hard mode bosses. So today I'm going to be showing you guys videos and making guides on exactly how you can take down every single one of these hard mode bosses. Now at first, when you first unlock these bosses are going to be extremely difficult, almost near impossible. But as you begin to level up and you gain experience defeating these bosses, you'll come to learn that they're actually a lot easier than you might think once you have the proper things equipped and built. Now keep in mind guys, you will need like a full team to all have these upgrades in order to make it this easy or even really have the best chance at it. And so it's always a good idea to try to go in with your level 40 characters. I see a lot of people going in with like level 20s, level 30s, and overall they're not terrible. They'll deal damage, but they don't have the defense required to take the attacks from the boss and all the enemies. Now also to pay very close attention to these attribute resistances. As you can see, this boss is very weak to poison damage. He's also very strong against fire, and he's also going to have extremely powerful electrical attacks. So keep this in mind before even going into the fight, and you want to create your build around all of these options here that it lists. So where it says electric resistance 7,000, that means that he's going to be doing an extreme amount of electric damage. But if you put on enough resistance to match that point, the 7,200 points, it will make it so it's a lot harder to take you down. Now, obviously, it's not as easy to do this as you would think because these blue mods, they don't go up to that high of a level, and you will have to get the purple version. Now, that being said, I beat all of these bosses with just the blue level toxic mod. However, I definitely noticed myself going down quite a bit more. Now, during this fight, if you're going up against Executioner, because he's so weak to toxic damage, it's a good idea to try and run Freyna if you have her. Now, it's so important that you have to run these specific characters in order to beat the boss. In fact, there's plenty of other better builds on other characters. One of the best builds for this fight is going to be using Glay, but if you don't have Glay and you only have, say, like maybe Freyna or Bunny, you can definitely still use these classes to beat the boss, but you will need to make sure you have all the proper perks on. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that you may want to slot in a crystallization catalyst to some of your characters as it will allow you to equip more mods. And for the boss fights, the mods are really the most important thing. They're going to keep you alive and they're going to make you deal more damage overall. So the biggest part before even getting into the fight is making sure you do have the right builds on. Make sure if you have toxic resistance, if you have it. Now I have just about every mod when it comes to resistance beside toxic. So I just put on as much as I could so I could at least see some of the benefits. Maybe not get one hit by his attacks, but obviously still going to go down pretty quick. Another thing you want to do is go into all of your different weapons. Put on the toxic perk on your weapons as well, as it's going to help you do a lot more damage to the boss since he's weak to that damage type. If you sort it by name, you should be able to find a perk that does toxic damage to your weapon. Now, it's not enough just to put these perks on. You do want to start upgrading these mods as well. I don't really suggest upgrading the mods that put damage type on your weapon, like the toxic electric fire. Go about upgrading the perks that do critical hit damage, fire rate, and overall damage output first, because each boss is going to require you to use a different element, like between toxic and fire, things like that. So it's not necessarily worth it to waste your materials upgrading those elemental perks, as they're on the next boss fight. It's automatically going to become useless. You're going to have to switch to a different perk anyway. So spend your upgrades on the other perks that just do overall buff to crit damage and things like that. Now keep in mind, guys, this guy's weak to toxic damage. I have a scout rifle here that does bonus toxic damage. As you can see there, it does 4,500 extra toxic damage. Then on top of that, we can slot in the toxic damage mod. And so the biggest thing that I've noticed when trying to fight these hard mode bosses is not only just putting on all the right mods and creating builds, but also compounding all of your damage and making sure that you stack up all the right damage types. This can make a huge difference. It can make a scout go from doing like maybe 6, 7k DPS per bullet all the way up to 19, 20k per bullet, just because you have all the right shots on. You're going to do almost double damage, and it has an extremely good fire rate. Now, I only really suggest running 3 weapons for just about all of the bosses, honestly. It's the Eternal Willpower, you will just need the Eternal Willpower, any scout rifle, a sniper, and maybe a machine gun, and you'll be able to take down all of the hard mode bosses. From there, it's really just going to come to making a build and making sure that you have all of the highest output components and reactors on. Now, keep in mind, guys, these reactors, this purple and gold reactors, the gold reactors only work for gold weapons. So it's good to find a purple reactor that matches up with either a scout rifle or an auto rifle, something that you know you're going to be using to get the benefits from your mod. Now, I've already made a ton of guides on builds and how to create mods, how to get the best weapons. I don't want to go too in depth with that now. I just wanted to show you exactly what you'll pretty much need to get started on the boss and to make it easier. And now we're going to go over all of the different mechanics of the boss. Now, hard mode versus easy mode, the mechanics are just about the same, but you'll notice that he is extremely more aggressive, has way more health, and he will, take you down pretty quickly. And if you don't have teammates that have super leveled up builds, it can become quite difficult. So in this video, I chose to use the Tamer, a scout rifle, and a sniper. Now, not to be being said, you don't necessarily have to have this specific loadout, but the reason why I chose Tamer during this boss fight is only due to the fact that it has like that 400 bullet clip. You can stack up crit damage, and because this boss doesn't move around as much as some of the other ones, the Tamer makes it so you can almost barely move, but it works out. So now when these hummingbirds pop up, this is the first mechanic you guys really need to be on the lookout for. These hummingbirds are extremely important to take out. The reason being is because you'll notice that the boss has 3 health bars. He's got the white bar for his shield, the red bar for his health, and then there's also this pink bar, this purple bar underneath on the bottom. You may be wondering what this means, and for all the boss fights, it actually means the same thing. This pink bar is going to charge up, and once it's full, it will cause the boss to go into what is their immunity phase. As you can see here, we filled up the bar. Now, we did end up staggering him, so it took him an extra minute to get in there. But as you can see there, he now goes immune. This will happen every single time that pink bar hits, and this is for all of the boss fights. This is what actually triggers it. So destroying those harpies or those hummingbirds, that is actually going to make it so that the bar, that pink bar, does not fill up as fast. And it's also going to make it so that you'll have more time overall to deal damage. Now, when you get into this fight, you and your teammates, you want to be focused on taking down his armor, just like in the normal mode. You want to take down his right and left shoulders and then his chest. But when he goes into this immunity phase, you'll notice you can't really deal damage to a lot of areas on his body. And this is because you do have to shoot a small crystal, which is located on his back. Now, this can be quite difficult because during this phase of the fight, he's going to be quite relentless with these airstrikes and these laser beam attacks. And this is why they highly suggest you have the electrical resistance mods on at 7,200. If you're over 7,200, it becomes a lot harder for you to be taken down by these attacks. Now, obviously, not everyone's going to have these mods leveled up and the ability to even equip all this stuff yet. So just do the best that you can. Now, once you're done with this phase, he's going to go back into the normal phase. But at this point, you want to start taking down his shoulders and his chest. As soon as you see these different shoulders turn yellow, which means they're ready to be grappled on, you want to get up there and take that shoulder out immediately. Now, it's very important during all of the boss fights, not just with this one, to make sure that you manually break off the armor. If you break off the armor by just doing nonstop damage with bullets and it falls off, the boss will not go into a state where he's staggered, and you'll miss out on 10 to 20 seconds of uninterrupted damage that your entire team could have done to the boss. So it is very important to not only break off these pieces, but to break them off in the proper order, because every time you break off a piece, you are guaranteed that he staggers out for about 10 seconds or so. So if you're communicating with your team, or if your team's paying attention and realizes that you're about to break off an armor piece, they can all have their ultimate abilities ready. They can have their LMGs reloaded. They can have all their highest CPS stuff ready to immediately start hitting his crit spots when he goes down. So every time these hummingbirds come up, you really do want to focus everything you have on the hummingbirds. Keep in mind, guys, Bunny's ability, you can see that electricity blasting out constantly. Although it does say that Bunny is not a great character, electricity is not a great perk to use on the boss, it is still an amazing perk to use for all of the ad clear. So you may see a lot of bunnies going into these fights, and you might be questioning yourself, why in the world would anyone run a bunny in this fight or any of the fights? And it is because of the ad clear and the fact that you can do so much AoE damage while you're still dodging damage from the boss. The biggest part of these boss fights is literally just staying alive. And so if you can deal damage while you're constantly having to run away and dodge all the enemy's attacks, now that's extra damage you can do that you wouldn't have necessarily done. Also, those AoE attacks, for not just for Bunny, but for any character that you can use, are going to help to take out the ads that spawn on the ground, those kingfishers that can be extremely annoying. But not only that, but you can take out the ads that are floating in the air as well. So if you're running Bunny, you don't have freyna, you can easily still get through this fight. You just need to make sure that you max out the blast radius on your electricity attacks and max out the power output so that you can help out your team and stay alive as well. Now, when it comes to going down in these fights, occasionally you're just gonna go down, and you may even seem like there's times where you're not even getting shot, and you just get taken down from what seems like almost nothing. This is because a lot of the boss's attacks will do damage over time. So as soon as they hit you, they'll start kind of taking damage away from you, and there's almost nothing you can do to get away. You'll stand behind a wall, you'll leave the fight, and they'll just still relentlessly tick away at your health. So it's kind of tough to stay alive at certain times. The biggest part of this boss fight I notice is these airstrikes. They can be extremely hard to dodge and they kind of just come out of nowhere. It is best to try to maybe stay away from your teammates during this phase, as it's going to deal a lot of damage. And if you're standing right next to each other, it's very easy for him to just take down multiple opponents at once. Now, after this, you want to get, when he goes back to normal, you just want to get right back on his armor pieces and destroy them as fast as you can. Now, another thing that I realized that people may have not have been doing is that once his armor is down, you still want to continue to hit that exact same crit spot underneath his armor. The reason being is because it's still a crit spot. It'll actually do even more when you hit it. Now, if you have the option to break his third armor piece, which is his chest, I highly suggest trying to go after it. But as you can see, the boss is constantly spinning around. You don't always have a clear shot on him. So you want to just go after whichever crit spot is the easiest for you. But if he gives you the opportunity, you want to go after the ones his shoulder pads and then his chest in that specific order. The ones on his knees are honestly not even important at all. And I feel as though they're only there as a distraction, because if you just focus on the shoulders and the chest, make sure to completely break off all three armor pieces. When it comes time to deal damage, when the damage phase comes around, you'll be able to just laser those at the same exact points, and you can deal an insane amount of damage. Now, when you shoot out his knees, it will stagger him a bit, but it doesn't really add any benefit. It kind of just wastes time that you could have been using to hit other crit spots. So you may have to go all the way down to the last 30 seconds of this fight. You may have to use out the entire timer to actually get this done. So I highly suggest just sticking it out. I see a lot of people like leave the fight sometimes even within the first minute or two, and you really won't know how close you are to beating the boss until you really let the timer run out, because sometimes you'll beat them even with only like 30 seconds to a minute left on that timer. The reason for this being is because they have extremely high defense when their shields are up, but once the shield is down, you'll end up realizing that their health bar goes down way faster than their actual shields. Another thing is that to really try to stay focused on the revives if you can. Going down a lot during these fights is just part of the fight. It's gonna happen. Sometimes you're gonna go down, at least right now, because we don't have our characters at the absolute maximum levels possible. So if your teammates start going down, just do your best to revive them. If it's going to cause you to go down as well, obviously just wait a couple seconds and don't get it right away. But just grab the reses when you can and don't back out, because, like I said, guys, you really have to stick it out and try and deal a solid 8 minutes of damage before you're going to notice that these bosses get taken down. Now, you can run this boss on any character and you'll definitely be able to get it done. But in my opinion, some of the best characters to use are going to be Bunny, Ultimate Glay or Normal Glay, and then Freyna, due to the fact that the boss is weak to toxic damage.